Hello and welcome to Sincerely Speaking. Today we will have a great conversation with Jade Handy. I came across Jade's work when I was researching some people for different events and different activities that I was putting together, and I came across his work, and what first stood out for me was his title, the Starting Over Coach. And we will talk in a minute about what that means. But he is outstanding. He has a wealth of experience, and he is great at helping people figure out where to go next and how to make that transition. So I'm really excited to see what we come up with in this conversation today, and I'm sure we will all get great value from our conversation. Dave, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Marcy. I'm really excited about this.
Now, for those listening that might not know your work or not know you yet, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and how you started this line of work?
Yeah, so great question. I've been doing this line of work for a long time. I tell people I've been doing what I've been doing. I tell people I've known what I would be doing since I was 19 years old. And so I've been involved in this field, in this industry, and doing this for a long time. I started my first coaching business in 2005, and then I started the current genre, I guess you could say, of coaching in 2014. And in between, I've done a lot of things, as I mentioned during our last interview, and I'll get into some of those in a little bit here. But basically, I've been helping people start over as self-employed people or as business owners. Sometimes they were a business owner and they're starting over as a business owner. Sometimes they're coming, out of, college. Sometimes they're coming out of just a job. And so there's lots of people, as you know, right now trying to start over. And so that's what I help people do.
Absolutely. Now, that's one thing that we talked about during the Claim Your Next Level Live event, in which you were an amazing participant. But we are noticing, especially since the pandemic, that a lot of people are starting to realize that they need to shift. They need to reinvent what they do. They need to give themselves permission to do what they have been longing to do, but that for whatever reason they have not pursued, right? And you, as a starting over coach, bring in a lot of experience on giving yourself permission to do precisely that, start over. So why don't you dive deeper into your story as the starting over coach and what led you to that title?
Well, great. And I'm going to tie that to something you said, giving yourself permission to do this, because you must have noticed that that's something that holds a lot of people back is they don't say, I don't have permission, but all their language implies that they don't feel like they have permission to do it. Who am I to do this, right? And I have never really had that problem because my story started off when I was really young. I've been starting businesses since I was in middle school, so early teens. And so I just would just go do something, whether it was knocking on the neighbor's door to mow their lawn or scoop their snow or detail their car or whatever it was. I just never had any compunctions about going out and doing something. And then one of the first big things that I did that really set me on this path was I graduated from high school the day after I turned 19. And at the end of that summer, I was there was a lot of anxiety because I'd been telling everybody for the last year and a half or so that I was going to be going to California after I graduated high school before I went to college, take a nice little sabbatical there. And at the end of the summer, I had no idea how I was going to get to California. I had no car, no money, no plan. I didn't know anybody out there. There's nothing. And so, but I didn't care. I went to the gas station. I picked up 3, 4, 5 newspapers from all the big cities, and I found a travel job. And I called them up and I asked them where they're going. Sure enough, they're on their way to California eventually. And I said, I'll take the job. And they said, well, you have to come apply. So I said, fine. I packed up all my stuff in my summer place and moved back home and unpacked and repacked and off I was to California. You can imagine what that was like for me to have to tell my mom, hey, mom, I got a job. I'm going to California. I'm going to be traveling with unknown people, who knows how this is going to play out, but it doesn't matter. I've got a goal. I've got to meet my goal. And so I was off and running, selling magazine subscriptions door to door, city to city, sun up to sundown, 6, 7 days a week from Iowa to California. And so, as you can imagine, that was a pretty big experience to say, who am I to think that I can do that? Who am I to start several businesses before that? By then, I'd had several jobs before that. So that's really the foundation of where I got started, is just that those big leaps of faith that say, why not?
That is so awesome. Now, there are three main takeaways that I got from your story right now that I would love for us to expand on at some point. But let's start with the main one, I think, is accountability. You said that you told everybody that you were going to do this thing. How much of a difference does telling people and having someone that can hold you accountable make in this type of transition that we're talking about?
Well, I think it varies for people. I always thought that public commitment was one of the great things to get you motivated to take the action that you said you would take. But actually, I read a study not too long ago that said a psychology study was done and showed that you shouldn't do that. So I can say that for me and a lot of people, that it's very powerful. If you tell somebody you're going to do something, you do it, you find a way to do it, you just make it happen. And oftentimes you have to take giant leaps of faith. So I think that accountability itself, making a public commitment, and then to yourself too. Several of the times that I've had started businesses, I had told myself, I'm going to leave this job in 3 years, come hell or high water. It doesn't matter. So I better have something in place. And so that's what I do. And what I notice is when you set that time commitment, that deadline to yourself and hold yourself accountable, the first time it's like gets really scary because I have to do it. So I got to figure out a way. And, Providence moves things to happen and bring things into play. You know how that works.
Yeah.
And then after the first time of doing that, when I made a huge leap, and my wife was pregnant with our first child at the time. And so that was a big leap of faith, but I found a way to make it happen. And then after that, it's like my mind knows Jade makes a commitment. He's going to figure out, he's going to do it. So you might as well figure out a way to do it.
That is awesome. And that leads to the second point, the second takeaway from your stories is that a lot of people feel, and I have to include myself in this, like when I first started making the shift, I thought I needed to have it all figured out. Like I needed to have a roadmap. I needed to know exactly where I was going. But one of the big takeaways from listening to you speak is that that's not necessarily the case, right?
Well, who is it? Mike Tyson that said, yeah, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And a popular military quote is, plan is a great place to start, but it never ends up that way. Something along those lines. It just never does. So it's always good to have a plan. But I don't always think you need to have a plan, but typically you're going to know what the next steps are at least, right? A lot of things we have no idea what the big grand plan is, but we know what that next step is. And so a plan can be, how am I going to make the leap? How am I going to get started? How am I going to take the next few steps to figure out the next few steps? Because I always tell my clients, you can always take the next step. There's always a next step you can take. So, and if you don't have a plan, find somebody that has a plan and implement their plan, or pay them for their plan and have them help you implement a plan.
Absolutely. Now, I don't know if you find the same thing that I do, but a lot of people that are facing the potential of transitioning or that feel miserable where they're at often express feeling stuck, like they don't think they have a choice, like they have to stay where they're at. How do you respond to someone that comes to you and says, Jade, that was great for you. You were young when you started all these things. You've always done it that way, but I'm stuck. I have to stay where I'm at. What do you say to them?
Well, I would say that's always a feeling that's present. How you get out of that is developing more choices. And a lot of times that means imagining more choices and reading books and autobiographies and things about other people's journey, and imagining yourself having more choices, having their choices. Harvard Business Review did an article not too long ago, maybe a couple years ago, about negotiation. And they found that the person that negotiates an option has a better chance of succeeding. Even when there is no option, they imagine an option that doesn't even exist, or maybe even couldn't exist, but the act of imagining something that couldn't even exist or might not already exist will get you through a slump like that and help you get unstuck. So, and then the other thing is there's a first time for everything. And if you imagine your past and your childhood, there's a first time for riding a bike, for climbing a tree, for going up to that first friend at the playground. There's a first time for everything. And your mind and body have a way of figuring it out when you get there.
That's awesome. Now, some of us are more risk averse than others, right? And this isn't just in
Yeah.
finances, this is in everything related to life. And you've mentioned a couple of times taking the leap of faith, taking the risk. For someone who is more risk averse, but they know somewhere in the back of their mind that it's time to make a shift, how can they start switching that mindset or moving out of that aversion to taking the risk?
Well, I love Robert Schuller. He said he likes to go past the point of no return, and that's it. So if he can just tell himself, I'm just going to go past the point of no return, then he's home free, right? He says, if I run halfway out somewhere, I'm past the point. I've got to run halfway back. So, a lot of times it's like that. You just have to, um, take a step and take a step until you're so far into it that I might as well. And you'll find that, it's like buying a car. As soon as you buy a car, you see all the other cars out there just like that car. What happens is you start noticing things that you can utilize the further you go into it, and you will never see those things or experience those things or hear about those things or feel those things if you're not in the moment to have to feel those things.
Yeah.
Your body and mind have to do so many things on a day-to-day basis. It doesn't have time to freak you out about everything that's possible, right? So give it some direction by putting yourself in that situation.
Absolutely. I think that that's one of the big issues that we suffer as human beings, period, right? Like it can feel so daunting and overwhelming to think about the entirety of the process, right? So today I'm an employee making a wage or a salary with these benefits. And over there in the other corner, I'm struggling to figure out how I'm going to get the daily's portion of whatever I need for my meals or whatever. And just in between, there are so many things that are in between stages, right? So trying to jump from A to Z without really looking at B, C, D, and all the other letters are in between is what tends to overwhelm us, right? So I think that what I hear you say is focus on that next step. Just look at that little bit and figure out that bit, and then the next bit will become clearer, right?
That's right. And reminding yourself that you can figure it out. Well, a lot of times I'll say, I'll figure it out. I'll tell my clients, just tell yourself, I'll figure it out. I'll figure it out. And one of the most powerful things I do with my clients is I pull situations from their past to help them be more resourceful in the moment. So a lot of times, for example, I got my screen all messed up back there. A lot of times what happens is I have to find a situation in their life, a context, a moment where they have had the resource that they need to get through whatever it is that they feel stuck. And that has made some of the biggest breakthroughs ever. For example, one time I worked with a gal and it was the economy was down and she was a top 5 salesperson for happened to be American Express. Out of 200 agents selling big deals, the quota was 4 deals a month. So they were bigger deals. She was in the top 5. The economy hit, her sales took a dump, and I worked with her, and she was so skilled. She was really, really, really good. Who am I to help her, right? Who gave me permission to help somebody like this who was, a very high performing person? Well, all I needed to do was take her back to when she had been really effective. And the next month, she was selling 1 deal a month when the quota was 4. The next month, she sold 7 deals and 1 deal worth $130,000 in commission alone. Wow. And I thought, she's going to love me up. She's going to thank me. She's just going to be like, hey, you're so awesome. You know what she said? She goes, really all you did was remind me of what I used to do. And I was like, wasn't that enough? Wasn't that enough? So she was obviously grateful, but if you can take people back and just help people pull from where their resources already are, it feels so natural. They don't think that it was some big, huge thing because it was just a switch.
Yeah, the other day, and I'm going to digress into one of my stories for a second, but it ties into what you were saying. The other day, my heart was so full, it could have exploded out of my chest with proud mom moment because my oldest daughter was talking to my youngest, and my youngest was complaining about something she needed to do. And my oldest just turned and went, you can do hard things, right? And that just filled me up so much. She's 17 and she's
Uh,
like citing these things to my youngest that's 12. But anyway, we need to remind ourselves of that all the time. We can do hard things. We've done hard things. From learning to walk is not easy. You fall a million times and you keep getting up. And from that down, you can count probably a million things that you've done that were hard. And just remind yourself you can do hard things.
that's right. And hard is coming no matter what we do.
Yeah.
Hard things are coming no matter what you do. So you might as well prepare in advance. We talked about that in our last interview about how you've got to you've got to set the stage for what's coming and work that muscle, work that hard muscle, right? You've got to get yourself to do things and bite off more than you can chew. But we'll get into that, I'm sure.
Oh, absolutely. Now, for someone who might be listening and thinking, I've been a little displeased with the way things are going, or I'm not completely satisfied, but I'm not sure that it's that drastic. I'm not sure it's really time to start over. What cues or what things should one be looking for in order to say, you know what, yeah, it's time to at least take the chance of starting over?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. If somebody came to me and said, "I'm not sure if it's time to start over," I'd say, "Well, maybe it's not."
Hmm.
I mean, yeah, maybe you're not there yet. Um, if everything in your world isn't saying it's time to start over, it's time to start preparing, that's a really hard client to help because where's the motivation,
Yeah.
right? The clients that I work, the first thing I do is find their motivation. Why do you need to do this? And why do you need to do it now? And why do you need help doing it?
Yeah.
Because if those three things aren't there, go ahead, hang out, go lay, go watch TV for, a few years and, then come back when you're ready. I don't know what to tell you, but I probably wouldn't try to talk somebody out of that other than just say, look around. The world is changing and you've got to, it's coming whether you're prepared or not. And so, one of my big things is I tell people how to, what to work on when they're not working.
Mm.
Um, you've always got to be working on something, preparing yourself and building up that reserve for when hard times come.
Absolutely. One of the things that I find that has become even more noticeable, in my opinion, since the pandemic is sort of coma that we're living in, right? It's like everything's okay, or let's just wait until it gets better, or let's just hang out and see what happens. And that disdain, almost, I don't know, complacency, I don't even know what word to use, but it's like the sense of, it'll be okay. I want to rattle people up a little bit. So, in your opinion, what price are we paying for that mindset that has permeated the world?
Well, I think you can take that to its logical conclusion. When you're talking to somebody, what happens if you don't? What happens if you stay? And we people like us know that it's more effective to get people, our clients, to say things instead of us just always telling them. And so
Mhm.
walk them through it. Maybe it's not a big deal. Maybe they're pretty well off. Maybe they have a trust fund we don't know about. Maybe they're going to win the lottery and nobody even knows. Maybe that's what they're planning on. You know, so just play that out. What happens if? What happens if? There's a reason why you've come to me. There's a reason why we're having this conversation. Something in you is stirring up these questions.
Yeah.
And so just digging into that a little bit more, what brought you here to this moment with me? Why are we, I use that a lot when I'm selling too. It's like, what made you decide to meet with me today?
Yeah.
Because if I say, hey, I'm glad we met today because I'm going to teach you so many things and I'm going to show you so many, they might be like, I'm not interested. Like,
Yeah.
okay, why are you here?
Yeah.
So I think that's the biggest thing, and getting that to come out of them.
Um, So going back to the conversation about making the change, right? So we've already talked about being sure of your why. Why now? Why is it important? What motivates you to go forward, right? But once we know that it is time, everything in our being is telling us, yes, you have to make a change. You have to do this thing. You have to start over. What would you say is the first practical step that we can take towards making these changes?
What is the first practical step? So I guess it would obviously depend on where they're headed, where their strengths are, what their interest is.
Yeah.
Um, for most people, it's really just working on the next, what is the next step? If you don't know the things about that, then you get what I call domain expertise. So there's
Mhm.
four different things to work on when you're not working. That's self expertise, domain expertise, um, industry expertise or domain expertise,
Mhm.
entrepreneurial expertise, and customer expertise.
Yeah.
So those four things: self, customer, domain, and entrepreneurial expertise.
Mhm.
Those first two things can be worked on without any um, interaction with the outside world.
Yeah.
Whereas customer expertise and domain and entrepreneurial expertise, you've got to experience that out in the real world. So, what is the presenting element? Is
Yeah.
it that you don't know where to go and who to talk to? Is it that you don't know which program to purchase, which franchise to purchase? Is it that you don't know, what is it that you don't know? And
Yeah.
then do everything in your power to answer that question. I think that's probably the thing that people lack a lot in those first few stages is they think somebody else has all the answers when in fact the answer is the next answer. What is it that you don't know? When
Yeah.
I consider myself to be self-educated, even though I went to college, for all of the different businesses that I've started, it's been self-taught.
Yeah.
And so it's like, what don't I know? What am I trying to do? Go bite off more than you can chew and then figure out how to swallow it. And that means, you know, find where the answer is, find who has the answer, and
Yeah.
then implement it. So I would say that's the first thing is really, and then when I work with clients, a lot of times they're like, well, what's your goal? And they'll say, well, I want to make more money. I have no idea where to start. What don't you know about making more money?
Yeah.
What part don't you know? Is it the next step? Is it, so you really have to find out what is it that you don't already know. If you know it, then you can obviously, take that
But
step.
yeah, it's just a matter of getting yourself to do it. That reminds me, I walk my clients through the levels of competence. And you're talking about going from unconscious incompetence to conscious incompetence to where you know what you don't know, right? And that's a very key thing, a key process to go through. Because if I want to go from here to New York, I have to first figure out the roads that I need to take and the distance. And there's a bunch of things, a bunch of variables, right? That I can work through before I can start planning. So that's a very crucial step, in my opinion, as you were saying, is just figure out, okay, if what I want is this, what don't I know? What do I really need to figure out first? That's very crucial, I think.
And it's chunk size. Okay. So for example, the the clients that I've worked with that get the most value out of their time with me are the ones who know at a very small chunk, a very detailed level what they need, what they don't know. Okay, so a lot of times what they don't know is how to get themselves to feel in a new circumstance. Okay, instead of I want to make $1 million or I want to make $100,000 or I want to start a business, those are really big chunks, right?
Yeah.
The clients that really make the biggest gains are, for example, I had a client who came out of the corporate world. She started a coaching business and she was really popular in the corporate area. She was a really high earner, and she had lots of friends. She had a great network, and that network really wanted to engage with her after she left the company and their industry to start on her own. But every time she was very competent, very confident. Obviously, she did very well in her previous role. But when she went to talk with them, she didn't feel confident because she felt like they were her peers, and who was she to do that? So in that moment she felt very uncomfortable. So I've worked with her on how to future pace a different feeling in that moment.
Mm.
And then bam, she sold her first 3 deals of coaching. She signed a deal worth 6 months of consulting for a large local corporation. And it
Mhm.
was all because she knew specifically what she didn't know. She didn't know how to get over that moment of discomfort.
That is awesome. And I think that that's something that all of us need to figure out, right? Like, where is the break? Where is the thing that is keeping us from moving forward? And how do we get past it, or how do we start working past it? So that is outstanding. Now, Jade, as we start wrapping up here our conversation, what would you say is the most crucial element that you help people work with? And you've mentioned a few, but the most crucial that we would need to work on if we decide, okay, yeah, we need to start over. What do I start with? What is the most crucial thing to work on first?
That's funny. As a coach, I'm likely to say your state of mind. My first coaching business is called State of Mind Coaching and Training. But I would say it's customer expertise, because if you know a customer segment really well, it gives you a lot of confidence, it gives you a lot of expertise, and it tells you where your customer is going to be after you get started. And it's so much easier to get started if somebody's knocking at your door wanting you to help them.
Yeah.
And if you put yourself in a situation where people need help and you figure out how you can help in that customer space,
Yeah.
in that customer segment, it's so much easier to say, oh, sure, I'll help you, than to go and talk people into taking a chance on you for the first time. No, they're asking you, hey, you've been in this space, you've been talking to us, will you help us with this specific thing? And they can say, yes. It's much easier than saying, please. Yes, it's much easier than saying, please.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, Jade, any last thoughts before we wrap up? And also, please tell everybody where they can find you, connect with you, and work with you.
Yeah, well, the best place to connect with me is on mastermind.com. Mastermind.com is a site for people like us in the self-education movement. It was started by Anthony Robbins and Dean Graziosi. And so if you go to mastermind.com and you search for Jade Handy, then you will find the courses that are live. And the best way, there's always some great free stuff to get started with me there. So that's really the best place to connect with me in an area of interest. And then I'll know where to take the conversation next by asking you questions.
That's awesome. Last thoughts?
Last thoughts. Thank you so much, Marcy. I love what you're doing in this space. I feel so honored to be a guest on your podcast here today. And I hope people have gotten a lot of our conversation.
I'm sure they have. As always, talking to you is always filled with value and wisdom. So thank you for taking the time to be with us today. And everybody, there will be links to Jade's mastermind page. You can also find him on LinkedIn, which is where I found him. Yeah. So make sure to connect and look for his things. Jade, thank you so much for being with us today and for sharing so much value with us.
Thanks so much, Marcy.
I just want to thank you so much for spending this time with me and Jade today. I am sure you found tons of value in my conversation with Jade. Now, for more resources and information about my upcoming projects and free workshops, make sure to visit marcyamaro.com. See you next time. This has been Marcy Amaro, and this has been Sincerely Speaking.